IndyPram, yes, IndyPram on IndyLive.Radio. IndyPram, yes, IndyPram on IndyLive.Radio.
Welcome to the IndyPram Podcast on Independence Live Radio. Scotland the Brief by Gordon MacIntyre-Kemp, Part 4. Scotland's Tourism Industry. Defining and measuring the tourism industry is harder than you might expect. Essentially, it is the spending associated with travelling to a nation for business or pleasure by a person who lives outside that country. As such, tourism spend is considered to be a service and an export, even though it happens in Scotland. Some tourism spend can impact on other sectors such as rail travel, and, of course, there is the internal tourism where people holiday or take business trips that result in an overnight stay. In brief, Scotland has a major advantage in tourism that is derived from its huge natural wealth. Scotland was voted the world's most beautiful country by readers of travel Bible rough guides, and it is the perception of rugged natural beauty that make people want to see Scotland. Adding to the draw of lochs, mountains, empty glens and unspoilt beaches is the draw of whisky and golf, mountain biking and some spectacular islands, towns and cities, and even a festival or two. Spending by tourists in Scotland generated around £11 billion of economic activity and contributed around £6 billion to Scottish GDP. It employs more than 207,000 people across 14,145 companies. Scotland's iconic tourist sites alone attracted more than 30 million visitors in 2017, a 9.7% increase on the previous year. Tourism is a vital part of Scotland's rural and remote economy, contributing 7% or more of the GVA of some of Scotland's most rural areas, attracting capital, visitors and workers to sparsely populated towns and villages. In 2017, Scotland outperformed the UK in terms of attracting visitors to its tourist attractions for the 6th year in a row. Top attractions include the National Museum of Scotland, Edinburgh Castle and the Riverside Museum and Kelvin Grove Art Gallery, hosting 6 million guests between them. Scotland's hotels outperformed those in all of the UK nations in 2017. Average hotel room revenue grew by 5% in Scotland, with Edinburgh achieving the highest occupancy rate after London at 85%. Key facts. Edinburgh Castle attracted a record-breaking 2 million tourists plus in 2017-2018. Scotland's tourist industry is thriving and outperforming the UK's in terms of growth. Edinburgh's festivals and fringe attracted approximately 4.5 million visitors a year and £147.4 million in net attendee expenditure for Scotland. For the 4th year in a row, Edinburgh was rated second after London as the most attractive location in the UK for hotel investment. Scotland is also the home of golf and has St Andrews, the oldest public golf course in the world. Golf in Scotland supports more than 4,700 jobs, contributing £286 million a year to the Scottish economy, a 30% increase since 2009. Scotland attracted a total of 142 million visitors in 2017 and saw international tourism increase by 17%. These visitors spent a combined £11.3 billion in Scotland, 17% more than in 2016. Scotland has seen a huge increase in European tourists since Brexit, while visitor numbers to the rest of the UK have fallen. The latest figures reveal a 22% increase in European visitors coming to Scotland in the year to September 2018, compared to the previous 12 months. This contrasts with a 7% drop in European tourists visiting the UK overall during the same period. This has led to claims that EU citizens are love-bombing Scotland ahead of Brexit, as they are seeing Scotland in a more positive light than the rest of the UK over Brexit. Threats to Scotland's tourism industry. If Scotland leaves the EU at the same time as the UK, then those positive perceptions, as noted, will be diminished. Hotels and restaurants specialising in Scottish produce will be less affected by Brexit. Imported food costs will be likely to rise, and that could squeeze catering margins. The inflation in food prices will be partially caused by barriers to trade, but also the likely lowering in value of the pound after Brexit, meaning it will buy less imported goods for the same value of sterling. This will, however, also have a balancing effect in that foreign tourists will find that their currency will buy more in Scotland than it did when the pound was stronger. As long as the tourists keep coming, there will be some balancing out of the positives and negatives with regard to international tourism. Domestic tourism is harder to predict, and although holidaying abroad on a weaker pound will be more expensive, inflation within the UK itself will also mean that holidaying at home won't save people that much money. The single largest threat from Brexit, though, is that Scottish tourism and hospitality relies heavily on a supply of migrant workers. Waiting, bar and kitchen work in particular, will face drastic shortages if freedom of movement is limited by the UK government's currently unsustainable plan to limit EU migration to people who earn £30,000 a year or more. Scotland's space industry. The space industry is a fast-growing part of the wider aerospace sector, which includes defence and is estimated to be worth £6.4 billion to the Scottish economy. The space sector is its largest segment, contributing £2.6 billion GDP to the Scottish economy directly, and as much as another £1 billion through its supply chain. Space industries are of growing importance to Scotland, where it is already well developed and a major European centre. In brief, it may surprise most people to know that more small satellites are built in Glasgow than anywhere else in Europe. About 20% of all of the UK space-related jobs are based in Scotland. There are approximately 132 space-related organisations operating in Scotland, 83 of which are headquartered here, a 27% increase on the previous year. A nascent industry. Space-related organisations generate a combined income of £2.6 billion. The space sector in Scotland supports 7,500 jobs, creating on average 300 new jobs a year. The Scottish Government is targeting a £4 billion turnover space sector in Scotland in 10 years. Glasgow is home to world-leading satellite manufacturers, while Dundee and Edinburgh specialise in auxiliary services. The Sutherland Spaceport project has attracted £17.3 million of investment, which will create 40 skilled local jobs and 400 additional jobs in total through the supply chain. The space industry offers manufacturing and research and development opportunities in cities, whilst providing infrastructure and jobs in rural areas, since spaceports need to be located in remote coastal areas far from the larger population centres. Key facts. Scotland, with 8.4% of the UK population, employs 18% of the UK space sector. Scotland's Sutherland is host to the UK's first spaceport. Glasgow builds more small satellites than any other European city, more than 70 a year. The UK Space Agency shortlisted 6 Scottish locations out of 8 for vertical launch spaceports, demonstrating that Scotland has the best vertical launch areas for reaching key satellites. Threats to Scotland's space sector. It should be no surprise by now that Brexit once again poses the largest threat to the growing Scottish space sector. The UK government is right in its claim that membership of the European Space Agency is not tied to EU membership. However, no grants to encourage space research and development have ever been given to a country outside of the European Economic Area, which is made up of EU and European Free Trade Association members. European space contracts work on a 7-year cycle, and so post-Brexit, UK companies will not be able to bid for the next batch of contracts to be awarded in 2020, which amounted to grants of £12.6 billion in the last cycle. The UK government says that after Brexit it wants to collaborate with the European Space Agency, but it can only do that if a deal is approved by the UK Parliament, and even then the opportunity for collaboration and the ability to bid for projects are vastly different outcomes. Therefore, the UK looks likely to be barred from using the EU's new extensive satellite networks and to be excluded from using satellites for monitoring climate change, natural disasters, and ecosystems such as fish stocks. The UK will lose access to the EU's most accurate alternative to GPS, the €10 billion Galileo satellite navigation project, capable of assisting maritime, mountain and car crash search and rescue cases and guiding future transport systems, guiding cars, management traffic systems and landing places even without the use of ground radar. The UK government has also acted to attempt to disrupt the transfer of encryption technology from the UK to the Galileo project in an escalation of the space industry collaboration spat. An independent Scotland as part of the EU or EFTA would be able to join the European Space Agency, and Scottish-based companies will be able to access the next funding round. Scotland's unpaid economy. You may be a little surprised to see this being discussed as a sector, but it's a much overlooked economic activity across the world and is rarely given due consideration. Unpaid work is misunderstood, partly as money does not change hands and as a result no taxation occurs. However, especially in the case of caring for a family member, if the work was not done then the cost would inevitably fall to the public sector purse. It is also overlooked by economists as predominantly occupies women, and historically it has not been regarded as real work by a wider society. This social construct leads to greater inequality in education and economic exclusion, which has a negative knock-on effect on the rest of the economy. In brief, the Scottish Government estimated that there were approximately 759,000 carers aged 16 and over in Scotland, representing around 17% of the adult population. This is larger than the paid social services workforce. 59% of unpaid carers in Scotland are women, and 74% of carers allowance claimants are women. Carers Trust estimated the value of unpaid care work in Scotland to be over £10.3 billion. 44% of unpaid carers provide 20 or more hours of care a week, a 7% increase since 2001. Additionally, 25% of unpaid carers have not had one day away from caring in 5 years. A further 40% report that they were unable to take a day off in more than a year. 274 of those people have reported a decline in their mental health. This shows that although some people manage to be carers and also work full-time, and others manage to hold down part-time jobs, the stress and often inflexible nature of caring can mean that carers are unable to work even part-time. Women are twice as likely to give up paid work in order to care. This takes women out of the workforce, diminishes their economic independence and reduces female entrepreneurship. This contributes significantly to inequality and negative health outcomes, often contributing to carers requiring care themselves in later life. A significant issue with this sector is that there are 29,000 young carers in Scotland. That is 4% of the under 16 population, and educational attainment can be stifled significantly and create a cycle of underattainment and poverty. Whatever the answer, it is clear that the UK government's austerity policies have stripped the cash and support for people occupied as carers and it is holding back our economy and our society. Helping Scotland's unpaid economy. A start. In March 2019, the Scottish Government announced that 75,000 Scottish carers were to receive their first payments of a new carers allowance supplement, backdated to April 2018. A 13% increase over the UK Government's Department for Work and Pensions carers allowance. The Scottish Government is essentially raising the carers allowance towards the same level as job seekers allowance. The single best reason to do this is to encourage gender equality, as the majority of recipients are female, compared with job seekers allowance, which is predominantly claimed by males. From an economic point of view, this isn't a major investment, nor will it stimulate economy greatly. However, it is a huge statement of intent by the Scottish Government to recognise the importance of the contribution that carers make, economically and socially, to Scotland. When looking at the economics of a nation, it's not just the numbers you want to look at, but also the issues relating to well-being and the values of the nation. An economy based on societal values, rather than casino banking, maybe that is the future. The breadth of Scotland's economic activity. A summary. What conclusions can be drawn when evaluating the data on the breadth of Scotland's economic activity? Far from being dependent on one industrial sector, an independent Scotland would be more economically diverse than most other nations. The UK as a whole is almost twice as reliant on volatile financial services than Scotland is on oil and gas. Norway's economy is just under 1.5 times more reliant on oil and gas than an independent Scotland would be, but they have managed that sector far more competently than the UK government, thereby managing to generate 25 times more in oil revenues than the UK government since the 2015 oil price fall. Renewable energy generation is a key opportunity in the future of the Scottish economy, and must be managed more competently on behalf of the people of Scotland than oil and gas has been. Scotland's food, drink and tourism sectors benefit from Scotland's unique natural heritage, generate significant export surpluses and represent huge growth opportunities for an independent Scotland. Creative industries, construction and education are core sectors in Scotland's economy, which contain examples of world-leading innovation and research, but all will be badly hit by the economic fallout of Brexit. Scotland also has a leading and growing presence in high-technology-related growth sectors such as life sciences, chemical sciences, digital industries, and a leading role in the developing space industry. Observations. It is clear that the economic case for Scotland's independence is not based on oil revenues, nor even on the damage that it will suffer from Brexit, although that will be severe. It is also clearly preposterous for anyone to suggest that a nation that has such natural wealth, advanced infrastructure, trade surpluses in goods, innovation and human capital, that also enjoys a hugely diverse economy with leading positions in many high-growth potential sectors, is not capable of thriving as an independent nation. In fact, the more we understand the strength of Scotland's economy, the more we can see that it possesses massively higher natural wealth and is more resilient and broader based than the rest of the UK's economy. Indeed, it is evident that an independent Scotland's economy would actually be a stronger position than all Northern European wealth leaders, except possibly our most similar neighbour, Norway. Norway, whose economy is far more dependent on oil and gas than Scotland's, is the 7th wealthiest economy in terms of GDP per head in the world. With all those economic advantages, research demonstrates it would be a mathematical certainty that Scotland would be better off as an independent nation. A person would have to assume that the government of an independent Scotland would make absolutely the wrong decision on the economy at every single time of asking. They would also have to assume that those decisions made in Holyrood would also be significantly worse than the equivalent decisions made by Westminster in order for this not to be the case. Nevertheless, we must look empirically at all the factors that could influence the wealth of Scotland as a nation, in order to fully understand if there is any possible case to be made that an independent Scotland could not thrive. So if it boils down to the decisions of government, let us look at both Scotland and the UK's track record on governance. Would an independent Scotland be well governed? There is no globally accepted definition of good national governance. However, the World Bank produces the Worldwide Governance Indicators Report, which aggregates 6 individual governance indicators for more than 200 countries, and we will use this as our definition. The top 10 in terms of good governance based on the WGI report includes New Zealand, Norway, Finland, Switzerland, Sweden, the Netherlands, Canada, Luxembourg, Denmark and Liechtenstein. The UK is currently in 19th place as its political stability score has been decimated by Westminster's handling of Brexit. Scotland is not ranked separately from the UK, but by assessing World Bank factors, a Scottish attitudes towards governance from 2016 Social Attitude Survey, we can see that Scotland's governance would most likely be more highly rated than the UK's. Let us look at the good governance indicators. Voice and accountability. The extent to which a country's citizens are able to participate in selecting their government. Scotland uses a proportional electoral system, which means that an independent Scotland would have an inbuilt advantage over the UK in terms of voice and accountability. For example, 47% of people said the Scottish Government was very good or quite good at listening to people's views before taking decisions in 2017, whereas only 16% said the same for the UK Government. Political stability. Perceptions of the likelihood of political instability and or politically motivated violence, including terrorism. The current political turmoil of Westminster with newly formed parties, for example Brexit Party, Change UK, and the deadlock on Brexit has been hugely disruptive. The World Bank has reduced the UK's score to 57 out of 100 in terms of political stability. There is no explanation given, but the assumption must be that this is a result of the Westminster government's mismanagement of Brexit. If Brexit goes ahead, then an independent Scotland within the Common Market and Customs Union via EU or EFTA membership would be far more politically stable than the UK. This is especially true if there is a no-deal Brexit, leaving the UK with no trade deals in place, or one where Brexit is cancelled and the Brexit Party challenges to form a government. Trust in the Scottish Government is also extremely high. 61% of people in Scotland said they trusted the Scottish Government just about always or most of the time to work in Scotland's best interests, whereas only 20% said the same for the UK Government. 37% of people trusted the Scottish Government a great deal, or quite a lot, to make fair decisions, whereas only 16% said the same for the UK Government. Government effectiveness. This includes perceptions of the quality of public services, the quality of policy formation and implementation, and the credibility of the government's commitment to such policies. For example, the Scottish NHS, which has operated independently from the English and Welsh NHS from inception, is viewed as a barometer of government effectiveness. The Scottish NHS consistently outperforms other UK health services. The percentage of patients seen within 4 hours at accident and emergency in Scotland in 2017-2018 was 91%. England 82.4%, Wales 77%, and Northern Ireland 68.7%. Healthcare spending in 2017-2018 in Scotland was £2,368 per person. England £2,182, Wales £2,324, and Northern Ireland £2,320. In 2015, Scotland had 4.2 hospital beds per 1,000 of the population, while NHS England had 2.4, Wales 3.5, and Northern Ireland 3.1. There are 76 GPs per 100,000 people, compared to a national UK average of 60. The Scottish NHS is far from perfect, and there will always be issues with such large organisations, but it is comparatively better and more highly funded, reflecting the different spending priorities of the Scottish Parliament. There is, therefore, no evidence that government effectiveness in an independent Scotland would be an issue. In fact, the evidence suggests that it is more likely to improve in terms of WGI score and to be more aligned to the values and priorities of the Scottish people. The other three world governance indicators include regulatory quality. By adopting EU standards, Scotland would already meet all of the requirements, although some new regulatory bodies would have to be established. Rule of law, which includes people's confidence in the rules of society, and in particular the quality of contract enforcement. Property rights, the police and the courts, for which Scotland and the UK are roughly similar. Control of corruption. Once again, public power is not widely exercised for private gain in the UK compared to other developed nations, and again it is an improbable suggestion that this won't be the same or even better in an independent Scotland. Trust in the Scottish Parliament. Voters in Scotland want the Scottish Parliament to do more. We can see this in the 2016 Social Attitudes Survey around the question of whether major powers should be taken from Westminster and devolved to Scotland. What people say about the Scottish Government. Is good at listening. Scotland 47%, UK Government 16%. Works for Scotland 61%, for the UK 20%. Makes fair decisions 37%, UK 16%. Areas the Scottish Parliament should have control over. Health and safety regulations 64%. VAT 69%. Corporation tax 75%. Oil and gas revenues generated in Scottish waters 73.5%. The welfare benefit system 74.5%. How elections are run 91%. Conclusions on Scottish governance. The governance of a nation is not about specific political parties or politicians. It is about the structure and systems of government that deliver for the people and the trust that those people have in their government in all its forms. The UK is highly rated in terms of governance, and Scotland's governance contributes to enhancing that reputation. In 3 of the World Bank's 6 governance criteria, an independent Scotland would have a significant advantage over Scotland in the UK. In the other 3 criteria, there is nothing to suggest that anything is likely to change for the worse with independence. Nearly 3 times as many Scottish voters think that the Scottish Government is better at listening before acting than the UK Parliament. The vast majority also believe that the Scottish Parliament can be trusted with greater powers such as taxation and benefits. Those figures predate the Brexit chaos that has engulfed Westminster, and so in all probability understate trust in the Scottish Government and distrust in Westminster significantly. Following the Brexit vote, it has become clear that the UK lacks the manpower, software and political ability to administer its own borders, customs processing and even to comprehend the issues at the Northern Irish border. This is a far bigger governance issue for the UK than the transition to independence would be for Scotland. In the event of a no-deal Brexit, the UK would also require hundreds of trained trade negotiators to do the trade deals required in a timely manner, which they do not have. The UK seems to have become ungovernable, and it is not as if leaving the EU is a hard thing to do. It is just that when leaving a trading and customs union, the UK can't expect to maintain the benefits of the membership of the club that they no longer want to be members of. The problem with Brexit lies in the fact that the UK system of government is broken and unaware of its true status in the world. Sovereignty is a good thing, but sovereignty's greatest gift in an interconnected, interdependent world is that it offers a nation the power to voluntarily share power over areas such as trade, safety and working standards to facilitate economic well-being of the people of the nation. You can purchase your own copy of Scotland the Brief at www.businessforscotland.com.
IndyPram, yes, IndyPram on IndyLive.Radio. IndyPram.